And welcome to Green Voices. Today we're chatting with Darren Hemphill, a IT technical, somebody that computers and has a business that's for quite some time. So I think a wealth of knowledge, somebody that could share some insights about what happened and how we respond to everything in lockdown, the COVID, and being able to work remotely. So I'm very interested to find out, how Darren handled it, and as well as how he dealt with his clients during that time. So welcome, Darren.
Thanks for having me.
Alrighty. So Darren, you have a company called Baseline IT, and you have been going for a long time. 15 years, 10, 15 years, and
Yeah, it's 13 years now, yeah.
13 years. Okay. And so basically, it's South African run company, but it's all over South Africa. So you've got a head office in Pretoria, and you're also based here in the Cape. So you deal with the whole of South Africa, and it's anything IT related for small to medium to large businesses. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically we started off 2000, and we were I came back from the UK, and we were one of the first companies to really make remote support a thing. So we were very big about getting infrastructure installed on site so that we could pretty much manage the client entirely remotely. So that allowed us to build out a call center, a remote desktop support center, just about anywhere we liked, and try and keep our on-site requirements at a client an absolute minimum, and do everything we could remotely. So, in those days, there wasn't really cloud infrastructure. It was more on-site infrastructure, but very cloud-enabled, if you want, or capable. And then all our desktop support was done by a remote call center with an on-site support component. So that's pretty much how it all started. Obviously, it's evolved a lot from then, but being always online has been a key component of our offering from day one.
Okay, so you say in the beginning it was 2007, and South Africa, we were behind in technology, or were we, compared to the rest of the world?
Look, so interestingly enough, I can actually give a good indication of that, because in the year 2006 I was living in the UK. So I would say that we were behind. I don't think ADSL had really become a big thing at that stage. It was just in its infancy, where it had been in the UK for a couple of years already. So I could see, it gave me an insight into where we were going. So therefore, remote support and remoteness, I knew was the future anyway. And yes, South Africa were behind. I mean, I remember we were supporting people on dial-up modems initially, Diginet lines and other leased lines and other crappy kind of technology, and then quite quickly, the big Web Africas of the now big Web Africa and AfriHosts were finding their feet in the online space and starting to roll out their technology, and ADSL became a thing. So yeah, that's we were behind, but we caught up pretty quickly. In fact, if I look at the internet speeds as we have now, they're on par with the rest of the world, at least locally. When we break out to international links and sites and like that, we may suffer a bit, but certainly locally our internet speeds are way up there. In the developed areas, with fiber, the fiber rollouts are very aggressive. So I think that so we're not too far behind as it stands.
Okay, so when you started out, it was with one or two clients, smaller clients, and you offered a few things, and then you started to grow with them as their companies grew, as they expanded, and then you started to add more and more people to this whole thing.
Yeah, basically, I think the key driver is, we're really interested in our clients' industries and their product offerings. And once you become interested in your clients and what they're doing in the work in the industry, and you can really add a technical edge. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for now. Is like, okay, fine, I know how to make a vase or a pot plant, or refine oil or whatever it is, but how do I take that and use that or market that, or run that kind of operation in a modern world, which is full of technology and full of technical advantages if you know how to take advantage of them or know how to use those advantages. So we found that by knowing our clients' business, we could really start to understand their problems and then research technical solutions to those problems, or if we knew them off the cuff, we'd do that. But ultimately, it pushed us all the time to continuously develop our technology and develop our technology offerings to ensure the clients remained ahead of their competition. We like the small business space because that's where the most entrepreneurial people operate, the big thinkers, the guys who want to punch way above their weight without having to have a staff complement of 100, and that means that we're pushed constantly to fill that gap in ability with technology. And that was our sweet spot, and we've grown off that premise for ages, and we've remained a fairly small company dealing with other fairly small companies, but companies who now compete on a much bigger, in a much bigger stage simply because of the technology they implement.
Yeah, so it's not they may be operating locally, but they're reaching a global market. So
a lot of them are, absolutely, yeah, and that's, but it actually applies both ways. When you operate locally, operate globally, there is technology can allow you to reach globally, but to me, it also enables you to play locally in a much against much bigger players, simply because you're smarter, you're more dynamic, you're quicker on your feet, and that's all down to technology and how you operate with it.
Okay, so everything was you were busy doing normal operations, you were going about business, and then COVID hit South Africa. Did you feel a more of a demand for what you offer, or was it exactly the same, or how did you approach February and March?
COVID, I'll be honest with you, COVID didn't really affect us that much. We were already in a personal capacity, or in our own company doings. We were already fully cloud enabled. We no longer have any servers on site. All our infrastructure is in the cloud. So for us to operate from any location was immediate and obvious, and didn't really change much. Our PBX is in the cloud, everything. I mean, it was just incredible. So all our guys just hopped at home and then answered the phones as if they always would, and life just carried on. The change did happen for our clients. Like some of our clients who had resisted the move to the cloud got a wake-up call all of a sudden when their infrastructure on site they now needed to access and they couldn't. But of course, all the technology we deploy as a standard already has this enabled, if not used at that point. So for us, it was just a case of turning it on, educating our connect into their office infrastructure, and then they could operate in a large capacity. So the first couple of weeks were very hectic for us because we were all of a sudden rolling out these remote calls, remote VPNs, and remote ability to our clients. But after that, it's not like we had to deploy any new technology per se. We just had to enable what was already existing, or educate our clients on how to use it. And then it calmed down after that. Then, unfortunately, we started to see the closures of the clients that couldn't cope, or industries that were in the industries that were hardest hit, and then that was sad to see. But ultimately, in terms of the clients that weren't in industries or were in industries that could possibly operate remotely, in other words, not tourism and other things, but they were totally fine, and kept operating completely remotely, and that wasn't an issue for them.
Okay, and now you're all it's all back on track. Everything's normal. Everything's opened up. Do you see it growing or staying the same, or do you see what do you see happening from now?
So this is an interesting discussion we've had internally recently, and how we've seen the tide turn. So basically, in the beginning, everyone who went home after they'd got over their hill of making sure they could still function, access all the data they needed to, and their operational technology that they need to function as a business, they went, "Oh, this home is amazing. We can just be more productive," and everything like that. Now, we were quite aware that was going to blow over fairly soon, because everyone said now working home is the future, but unfortunately it's not, because you don't only go to work to get work done. You go to work to be part of a vision. You go to work to be part of a culture. You go to, those people who love their jobs, and I've met a lot of them, they go to work to be part of something bigger than what they have at home, bigger than their home lives, bigger than their, I say bigger, it's different from their family. It's almost like a family you build at work. And there's a culture behind that, and there's leaders that you look up to and inspire you to work harder and be better and better yourself and all those sort of things. So for all those type of companies, staying at home is not an option, because your culture will stick with you for a bit, but over time it degrades because you don't have that person next to you. You share a joke with, a work joke, a joke about that you can't share with your family because they don't get it. Also, working collaboratively on a project with a person or a group that sits 4 feet or 5 feet away from you, and there's maybe 5 of you in a team working on, you can't replicate that in a virtual world. And so initially people started giving up offices, and then they watched their businesses start to take a hit. And we've seen 2 people order their staff back to work, not totally back to work, but mostly back to work. In other words, you can take maybe 1 day a week off, or 1 day every 2. But ultimately, we need you back in the office because we need to bind people together in a singular vision to achieve our goals. And if you don't have that, then you end up without a culture and without you miss out on a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise miss out on if you were sitting around in a group.
Yeah, there is something about being around people as opposed to virtually through a screen. There's like almost like a bit of a divide, and you can't get the...
Sorry, if you dial back to caveman times, the singular thing that humans had above other animals is their ability to organize, their ability to understand that a single human will be flattened by a lion, elephant, or a myriad of other creatures very easily. But you put 100 of them together, and they'll dominate any landscape you put them in. And that's ultimately what we're talking about here. If you take people and you put them behind a screen, you're eroding that community, eroding that organizational ability. And yes, we've got the supplements of the screen and the Zoom meetings and whatever, Skype or whatever it is, but it doesn't replace actual community glue, the banter, the relationships that you build through physical contact or through proximity. It just sort of can't replace them, not in a long term. And even if you go back to Steve Jobs and Apple, when they designed their new building, they designed it specifically so people would bump into each other, interact in random ways to create new opportunities that you couldn't predict otherwise. And if you go remote, all that disappears. It evaporates immediately, and there's a lot of opportunity lost in that.
Yeah, it's the nuance. It's the subtle things that you can't really say or you can't pick up unless you. Yeah, it's the subtle things, the innuendos that people pass at the water cooler or something, or the cup of coffee that you share, and something comes up, an idea, and then it's, especially if you're in, I suppose, in technology where you're moving so fast and so quickly, and you need to stay ahead. So yes, you can sit in your own little bubble, but you can also then lose that because you don't build it, you don't share it and explode it out.
I mean, there's and Elon Musk is a big believer in that. He said that the person who's going to design the best oven is the guy who's an engineer but loves to cook. That's a multidisciplinary thing, and you can't always expect that to be in the same person. Now, if you love to build stuff and you're sitting next to a guy who loves to cook, at some point you're going to come across
person that loves to know that the oven will clean itself. So you need 3.
Yes, that as well. But you see, that's what comes from teams, is that you have multi-disciplines. And if you're in an environment where you're overhearing each other talk about problems, and the guy says, geez, I love to cook this, but my oven is an absolute nightmare and I can't find a good oven. The oak is thinking, I could build one that is amazing. I need you to tell me what you want out of such and I'll build it because I love building stuff, So totally different disciplines, different passions can come together to create something amazing. You can't, how would you get that possibly over a Skype call or a Zoom call that you need to have for a purpose that you already had prior to the call? And that's actually quite an important part, is that society and whatever almost creates purpose, whereas virtual operations, you have to have the purpose already or the shared purpose already, and then you enable it via the video call or the video conference or the meeting or whatever. And that's, I think, the difference. I remember in the early days of building, I'm very customer focused, and when it was just me doing support, when I started the company on my own, very interested in what the customer's experience was and whether their problem was being solved by our technology solution, not so much as developing the solution itself, but is your problem solved? And when I started to offload some of that responsibility, because we built a bigger team and everything like that, I used to make sure I sat next to the team that was behind the phone so I could listen to them and make sure that they were meeting that same client need that we'd built the entire company around. And because a lot of them are just interested in solving the technical problem. And I said in the beginning, it's like, if you solve the technical problem but not the human problems, you've failed. So don't do that. But you can say that. But if I'm listening in on all the conversations simply by being next to the person, then I can say, when he got off the phone, it's like, listen, the customer's actually in that case asking this. They want that. So I don't think you've really solved them. So phone them back and ask them these kinds of questions. And I can coach them through that. You can't do that again in an environment where you're phoning someone up to achieve something. There's no it's difficult to explain, but there's no natural cohesiveness that's occurring by being in proximity of another, and that's by overhearing someone or discussing something over a water cooler or whatever it might be.
Yeah, because the same is happening at universities now, where everyone works in their own faculty or their own departments, and they're starting to find that if you put the different faculties together, more comes from that, because maybe if you're a scientist, you may not necessarily know how to do a research paper with the correct methodology. So you bring in somebody that maybe looks at things more as a, how do humans or psychology, how do people work together, and how do you combine that? So then they can start to collaborate in their different specialities, and I think you get better results from that, because there's more of a fully thought about plan, as opposed to just, okay, let's work in this direction, and everybody gung-hos and goes in that direction, but you're missing like the human element.
Well, that's the idea of consulting. You really want to consult your problems or discuss your problems or your ideas with people who offer a different perspective, who offer a different skill set. So either they can advise or collaborate. And that kind of discussion, it comes more naturally in an environment where you're immersed in other people's worlds, as opposed to an environment where you're not. When you're at home, you're immersed in your own world and your own challenges, and you don't necessarily think about asking, hey, listen, maybe I should get this person's perspective on this. You almost want those intrusions into your world to give you the opportunity to understand there are different perspectives and there are different ways of thinking about the problem that you're having. And so when you're in a collaborative environment, the intrusions come automatically. Someone overhears something and will intrude in your world and say, hey, I heard you talk about this. I've had this experience, and this is what well, this is the value I can add then. And some of the time it's rubbish. You can say, like, okay, interesting, please go back to your corner and stop bothering me. But in other times, it can actually change the way you think. And I think that the greatest workplaces have been built around that sort of thing, where you're in an environment where you're surrounded by people you respect, who will have the ability to change the way you think. And that's not something that is easy to do, but it comes if you share something with the people around you. And most efficient and effective workspaces have that singular sort of thing, where you're surrounded by people you respect, who challenge you, ask you questions, who have the ability to influence you in a non-destructive way, and you feed off that energy. And I think, we discussed that a little bit, and it's very true, but there are opportunities for technology, I think, in the future to be able to replicate that to a degree, and that is completely virtualized environments where you do sit in an office, and you can approximate it now by putting a Zoom sort of screen on and run it full time, or a Skype screen on a wall. And we've experimented with this, having full time, all day Skype sessions running between offices to help bring a cohesiveness. but unfortunately, it's still not there yet, and it's still just a screen, and you don't really overhear people as you should, as if they're in the same room. But coming down the road at some point will be fully collaborative environments where you plug in, put on a set of goggles and a full headset and whatever, and you become immersed in that environment, and you might necessarily be able to achieve the same kind of office space, but I think there'll still always be something missing, because there's the tactileness which will be missing. I'm personally a very tactile person, so I like to shake hands. I like to greet people physically. Now in this day and age, you can't do that. But having said, the first thing I did, as lockdown started to open up with my friends and family, is shake their hands and greet them, hug them, and that sort of thing. It's a very important part. And I think that it lends itself to what I was talking about, which is that respect thing. I think people I'm more tactile with, I automatically feel closer to. And that creates the ability, the rapport that's required for them to be able to influence me, and for me to be able to influence them in the way they think. And then again, collaboration and real growth comes from those kind of connections. So whether that'll ever be able to be replicated in virtual, I hope not, but it might be to a degree. But we'll have to see what the future holds there.
Yeah, I suppose that's that whole sensational experience. Also, we try to do that when you go into a store or a shopping experience. You want to immerse the customer in an entire experience of not just like touch, tactile, but it's also sight, what you see, what you smell, what you hear. So you want the whole ambiance, everything around you. So I suppose they're trying to do that now with the online and online experiences, the user experiences, trying to make people feel more engaged. So they're working obviously with all their algorithms and trying to get people talking to people's personalities or people's desires or what they want. So yeah, we've been read, we've been obviously watched by big media or big social media. So that's also quite something a lot of people are nervous of, this whole, there must be an agenda, there's something happening out there. So
well, I think you do have to be nervous of that, because you take a look at even the conversation we're having here across Skype. Microsoft isn't making any money off this phone call, so why are they providing the software? They're doing it because there's another agenda there, and that agenda is corporate and it's profit. So the challenge we have when it comes to, you mentioned experience and immersing yourselves, is that if we get to a point where people can really influence your emotional state very easily via technology, and the people behind the technology war are driven by profit, that means you really become your emotion becomes a marketable attribute, a saleable asset to someone else. So if I can instill fear in you, I can get you to buy something that you're scared of. If I can instill passion for you, I can get you to buy something that you're passionate about. If I can evoke those emotions, I can leverage them to sell my product. And that's the thing I think we really got to be scared of. The more we allow our emotions to be influenced by the technology conduits we use, if this is one here, and that's the real challenge about it, is that if we could ensure that there was no capitalist benefit to us digitizing our interactions, then I think we'll be okay. But as long as there is, then the motive will always be profit, and the motive will never be look after the person. It'll be just make money out of this person any way you can. I think that's where we are now, to a degree, with social media, and that needs to be addressed. And it's pretty scary, but yeah, and that's one of the big problems with all the free interaction that we experience on a day-to-day basis. It's not actually free. Someone has to pay for it somewhere. So the question, who is paying for it? And that's a big question that needs to be answered. I would prefer if the certain things that we were offered for free were offered by non-profit organizations that had no interest in providing profit, that had only interest in the benefit of humanity. I think there's a big need for that in the world today, because currently it's just also all offered by for-profit companies, and they have to make money for their shareholders, and I get that, but that's not the only thing, and they shouldn't be the organizations that dominate the landscape.
But then you would say a philanthropist like Bill Gates, maybe Soros, they have an agenda as well? They may be offering, free vaccinations for everyone, trying to prevent it, but there's still an agenda there, obviously. So I don't know. I think we,
if the agenda is, you see, and then you do need, but actually, that's just something you just need to consider. What is the agenda? If Bill Gates can say and can be proven that his agenda is, look, I've made all my money. I don't need to make any more money right now. I want to build a legacy. I want people to remember my name. That's fine. That's okay. If that's his agenda, great. Go and build and call the next malaria vaccine the Gates vaccine. That sounds cool. There's no impact on humanity, negative impact on humanity for that, with that agenda. So agendas are everywhere. The questions are which ones are harmful and which ones are not. I mean, and like I said, I don't think that any of Bill Gates' organizations at the moment are for profit. They're not there to make a profit. They don't have to please shareholders. And if you're driven by that, then that's fine. But as soon as you have to please shareholders and you have to make money, then that's your reason for being.
Somebody's being sold.
A product's being sold, whether it's a person or that's the thing. I mean, if you just compare Google and Apple for a second, Google makes Android, Apple makes Apple products. You buy Apple products, but you get Android for free. So how does Google make all the money to develop Android on a constant basis? They're selling some other product, whereas Apple are not. They're not selling it. They're selling the product that you see. So that's the difference between the two companies. And you really got to, again, look at the agenda behind the products they're offering. Apple's definitely out there to make money, but you can see where the money's being made. Android, Google's also out there to make money, but where are they getting the money from? What product are they really selling? And that's where your agenda comes in, and you need to weigh that up when you use people's free stuff, especially free stuff.
So now with the COVID tracker that this app that you have to sign into, say if you're with Discovery, you're still on that. So that's a whole tracking system. What is your opinion on that?
I think the tracking system under the right guidance is a good thing, because but not in its current incarnation, because if it's being deployed and the data is being harvested by for-profit organizations, then they're going to say, well, I'm harvesting all this data and providing all this service. Where do I get my money from? Who's paying me to provide all this? It has to be answered. And if the answer is not forthcoming, then the people are going to look to sell whatever they've got, and what they've got is data. And data equates to people's lives and invades privacy and all the rest of it. So whereas, if we could get to a point where all data that gets harvested needs to be declared accepted in real terms, not some thing you scroll to the bottom of and click accept, but maybe there needs to be a guardian of the data, the digital selves that we put out there, and that guardian is very carefully managed, and companies can subscribe to that data set for a particular purpose, and that purpose is very well documented. Then people can choose if their digital selves get marketed or not, and they can do a real trade-off, and that becomes a choice. And then you coming back to the COVID thing, is then if you know that your data is going to be pushed into a system like this, which you can trust, that's obviously the key point. You can trust it's not going to be abused, and you really have good, and it can be almost insured, then I won't have a problem with the people using my data to track the COVID spread and everything like that. I think it'll be useful, beneficial to humanity. But as long as it's been done by for-profit organizations, you've got to know that that's the agenda, to make money. It's not, you can't, in the early days, Google had the philosophy built into their constitution or whatever it was, do not be evil. That was removed. Why was it removed? Because they can't ensure that everything that they do in the future is going to be altruistic. They can't, because they've grown as a company. If you take a look at the early Sergey and I forget Alec's name who started Google, but they hated advertising in the beginning. They thought advertising was the devil's work, and a lot of us in technology did, because it just sort of subverted what this beautiful thing that was creating when the internet was growing up. And And then all of a sudden, they brought in a CEO to try and monetize this Google engine that they built, which was amazing. And that person said, well, advertising is the way to go. And all of a sudden, Sergey changed his mind overnight. Well, it's actually a good thing. Why? Because billions of dollars were on the table.
Yep.
Now, that's a subversion of a real, a moral standpoint that you had. All of a sudden, money just went and destroyed. And that's what happened.
Yeah, money always seems to talk.
And that's why you need to have two components in the world: the altruistic, looking after humanity side of things, which needs to take charge of certain aspects of our lives or our data, or and needs to be its focus. It needs to be run by people who don't care about money, who only care about other people and whatever. And then there does need to be the capitalist side, which is another big component, and that capitalist side drives. The future drives technology, drives evolution. There's lots of stuff that's important about this side of things, but they have to exist in balance. And if one dominates the other, we're in trouble, either one.
And now there's no such thing as like a UN for digital data. There's no guardian at the moment.
No, they should be a guardian of our especially that part, because it's if people, social media is a big manipulation tool, and we manipulate people every day. Well, social media does, and again, that just shouldn't be allowed. And there should be some organization, a UN for digital selves or whatever it is, that protects humanity from its worst aspects, and its worst aspects from itself. And unfortunately, in modern society, the worst aspects of ourselves seem to appear in corporate and capitalist side of things. And at this stage, in the early days, it happened in the sort of socialist communist type, or like that side that can also bring out terrible parts of humanity's personality. So we really got to collaborate those two ideas into something that works for both sides and dampens down these bad parts of ourselves and our tendency to become too capitalist or too communist. That to me is the future.
Yeah, I suppose that's quite a big ask, because who takes that task on? Are you going to do it?
That's funny enough. That's what governments exist for, if they function properly. Governments and the UN, which is another governing body, but governing bodies are there supposed to look after the people. And then the problem you have now is that capitalists influence government way too much. The fact that a capitalist organization can make a donation of billions to a government organization or a party that represents government, that's just wrong, because there's influence right there.
While patting on the shoulder and shaking hands, like we saw just recently. Yes, we wonder what's going on.
Well, you see, in the early days, one of the biggest advancements that humankind made was the separation of church and state. So the church no longer had influence on the state, and the state no longer had influence on the church. That's an amazing advancement and propelled us forward. But the same separation needs to happen between business and state. Those people shouldn't be in bed together. Every problem we have with government is because of private enterprises' influence on government, all the corruption we have, and because government is supposed to be there to serve the people. Capitalists are there to serve the shareholders. Those are two different, stakeholders. Very two different.
Yeah, I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect government, though. There's no perfect political system. There's no perfect economic system. I think those are all things that we constantly strive towards. It's nothing that we'll ever reach. I think it's a journey towards something, and we can only try and be better.
Absolutely. Improve.
One question for you now. One thing. Okay, I'm going to throw this one at you. So you obviously you've got a lot of insight into everything. Is it something that you do from reading books? Do you look online? Where do you find your information on just general everything from your technical side as well as from your general day-to-day life?
I do read a lot of books. And I used to be a big sci-fi and fantasy reader when I was younger. I have since then stopped that, and I just found that the things that interest me mostly are business books and building large organizations that have the ability to influence many people, and a lot of the ideas that are put into those kind of books are are about. I mean, no one writes a business book, well, not business books I read, to say let's make a ton of cash. It's more like let's build something of value. And what you determine value, some people determine as cash, other people determine as purpose or other things. But the kind of leadership books that I read are really about building something of value, organizing humans into a singular purpose, and often that purpose is beneficial to humanity, at least in the book side of things. So I get a lot of information from there. I read a lot of news. I run a lot, and then I think about problems that we face, and I do my best thinking when my brain is tired. One, my body is tired. And my brain seems to go into overdrive, and I do a lot of thinking. So all the best ideas I've had in my business where a singular change has made a big influence have actually, I can almost pinpoint them down to, at some point on a run, I stopped running and went, hold on a minute, that's a good idea. So exercise is critical to my thinking process. And but I like to think, and I like to posit thought experiments to myself, to my peers, to my children, because they can offer a lot of insight from their perspective, and just see what happens, see what comes out of it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Darren, it's always like a pleasure speaking with you. Great well of knowledge. You've got good insights, and yeah, I'll wave at you next time you go on your long run, and with your dogs. And yeah, well, thanks very much for taking some time and having a chat. Have you got any parting thoughts for anybody that wants to emulate you, go in your direction? Where do you like?
Look, I think that when building, if we're going to talk about business per se, I would say follow as many of your ideas as you can. I found that every single interesting thing I've done, an idea that often was a collaboration of other people's ideas that I've solidified into something interesting and built a product out of it, or built a service out of it. So if you have any ideas, just take them for a spin and see how they work. Chat about a lot of people with them. I've got about 4 or 5 ideas now that I have no time to turn into a product, but I like to ferment them over time. And some of them are even, it's too early. And like I had an idea 5 years ago that just wouldn't have worked, but now all of a sudden it becomes a possibility because it's fermented over time. I've chatted with a lot of people, and it could really be the next product I deploy. So ideas are critical, and they need to be worked on. And I do have this friend which continuously frustrates me. I say to him, dude, I built this product. And he says to me, no, I had that idea in 1998 or something. I'm like, well, if it's just an idea, then you've done nothing with it. What's the point? So, and he does it with everything I talk to him about. So it ends up being a bit frustrating conversation. But so in order to not be that guy, take every idea that you've got, discuss it, talk it, try and build something out of it, take it to market in whatever way you can, even if don't worry about the cash. That'll come if it's great. But just try and get it into a public arena so it can be enjoyed, ridiculed, laughed at, critiqued, all the other stuff that comes with building something from scratch.
So be bold. Take that step.
Be bold.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Be bold. Darren, thank you. An absolute pleasure speaking with you. Keep well. I'm going.
Cheers.